Welcome back to the Ginger Joe Show. Of course, the boys are not here, you will have noticed, which is unlike them. It's usually me who's missing in action. However, they are recording with Kieran over on his channel their thoughts on Galway this week. So I've just jumped on to waffle through Goodwood for you. I've got a good few fancies, some real nice prices, all of which are generally at double figures. So just going to give you my fancies through the Goodwood card, which kicks off tomorrow, and hopefully there's a good few winners in there. As always, please support the channel by liking and subscribing. It costs you nothing, it's really beneficial to the channel itself. Bear with me as I waffle through the card, and hopefully, as I say, there'll be a good few winners in there. So we'll kick off with the Chesterfield Cup handicap tomorrow, the first race, 120 at Goodwood. And there's a few horses in here that caught my eye, but I've settled on two of them. Now, both of these horses need to return to form, but there were signs from my first selection, English Oak, on the last day. He was stepped up in trip, of course, a winner last year at the Royal Ascot meeting over the 7 furlongs in a competitive handicap. He was stepped up, as I say, at Hamilton last time out, and albeit outpaced during the race, he did actually stay on really nicely to finish second behind an impeccably bred horse for Roger Varian. That horse is now rated 103, whereas English Oak's now down to a mark of 97 and was giving him £8 that day. Yes, he was beaten by him, but the winning margin was not all that. What was eye-catching was he stayed on really strongly, and I think this step up to 1 mile 2 should certainly suit, and I thought he could outrun his odds at around about 20 to 1. So English Oak will be one on my radar. And the other is the winner of this 2 years ago, Ancient Rome. He has Jamie Spencer back in the saddle, who clearly gets on well with him. He was on board when he was the winner of this in 2023. And he has not ridden him on his last couple of starts. Billy Loughnane and Rob Hornby were in the saddle, so it's good to see Jamie Spencer back on board. You can probably give him a tactical hold-up ride and deliver him late, as Jamie Spencer usually does. He's off a nice mark, £5 lower than when winning this 2 seasons ago. He's seen a bit of support in the market, been backed in from 20s to top price now, 12 to 1. But he was another one on my radar. Of course, a course and distance winner. So those would be the two for me in that. Then our first group race, and we move over to the Vintage Stakes. And speaking of Jamie Spencer, I do like his ride in here. Hugo Palmer's been banging in the winners. He had 2 on the weekend, a 22 to 1 winner with Cheshire Dancer, as well as Fitzella, who was extremely well backed. And he's got Laureate Crown in the same ownership as the previous race, Ancient Myth, Brave, forgotten what it was already. Ancient Rome, the same colours as Ancient Rome. And I think this race could set up quite nicely for Laureate. If you go Laureate Crown, if you go back and watch the debut run, it was an absolute brilliant ride from Jamie Spencer, weaving through the field, all hands and heels, no need for any encouragement from the whip, and just got up in time and won really as he liked. And I think he could set up for something coming from the back. I think he could have a fair bit of pace on up front. Humidity's gone forward on his first 2 starts. I think he's a really nice horse. Obviously, Wafnan must have paid a pretty penny to secure him from Cheveley Park Stud. But James Doyle's gone forward on him on both occasions, and then just found more than anything else when asked for his effort when coming off the bridle, as he did at the Raw meeting. I won't put anybody off back in Humidity. I think he's a really smart horse, but I think they could go too quick up front. And Laureate Crown, given Hugo Palmer's current form, given the fact that this horse was extremely impressive on debut, he was available at 20s. Again, he's seen a bit of money, but he would be one on my radar for sure in the Vintage Stakes. Onto the Goodwood Cup, and this race doesn't really tickle my fancy too much. Illinois obviously in at favourite, 6 to 4. He has been slightly weak in the market since yesterday. Given the fact he finished over 7 lengths ahead of most of these when being beaten by 7 lengths himself by Trawlerman, he probably is a worthy favourite. He doesn't do it for me at 6 to 4. Not many horses would. Perhaps on too price sensitive, maybe there is value in that 6 to 4 given the rest of the field. French Master's interesting, I think at a little bit of a bigger price, 11 to 2, what I'm currently looking at. But he would need to settle a bit better. Slowly away the last day, and then quite keen through his race. And then some of these we've just seen, they're coming back time and time again. Dubai Future, True Shan, Sweet William, and I just think potentially their best days are behind them. Sweet William would be of interest, obviously a course winner. If I was really looking for something to take on Illinois, I'd probably settle on him, Sweet William, at around about 10 to 1 double figures. And currently you've got the dead 8. So you would be getting the 3 places. So probably be worth an each way poke because I don't think Illinois is bomb proof, but others may disagree. On to the following day. And we've got the Kinsem Handicap, one of my biggest fancies of the week. Parole Doro, available now at 9-1. This horse, go and watch his last start. He was given a ride by Hector Crouch that he'll definitely want back. He would have got up and would have beaten Dutch Decoy had he gone for home a little bit sooner. However, he didn't quite get his head in front, went absolutely finishing like a train. He now steps up in trip even further to the 1 mile 2 here, and I think that will see him to better effect. Ryan Moore's booked in the saddle. He's certainly off a nice handicap mark. That form line behind Dutch Decoy was franked when he went back to Newmarket 7 days later and followed up and won again. So Parole Doro, I would not put anybody off backing. He's available top price currently 9-10-1. Anything at double figures, I'd be getting stuck in. So that is one that I really fancy. Over to the Richmond Stakes. I do not have an opinion in here, but I don't know why Havana Hurricane is suddenly such a big price in this Group 2. Obviously very well back the last day when not quite winning, but Eve Johnson Holton's in a really good vein of form. 77% of her runners are running to form. She's got operating at a decent strike rate of late. But this race is a little bit tricky. You find in these kind of 5-6 furlong races, they seem to take turns in winning, and they can be a tricky puzzle to solve. So one that I'd need to have a greater and better look at. If you fancy anything in particular in the Richmond Stakes, then let us know in the comments so I could do some help with finding a bet in that. I'll actually be at the track on the day. So if anyone can give me the winner of that, I'll be pretty appreciative. We'll skip on to the Gordon Stakes. Merchant, really good winner last time out. It was bizarre, really, with him. Apparently, there was an issue with the horse that hadn't been declared to the owners. They weren't sure if he was going to run. The vet had to have a look at him, and then he still went and bolted up anyway for William Haggis. Tom Marquand on again, steps up into group company. I think he could still be difficult to beat. I think the rest of them are a bit of a much of a muchness. And as much as I don't really like playing at short prices, the 11-8 about him probably isn't too bad of a price. So probably one that I'll be keeping on my radar for later in the week. But again, not a huge opinion. As you guys probably have worked out over the course of the few episodes I have been on, I tend to play a lot more in the handicaps and looking for bigger price values. So especially when we move on to the Nassau Stakes and there's a 6-4 favourite, that's not going to tickle my fancy. 6-4 at 7-4 against the field with Whirl and See the Fire. Perhaps it's Cersine being a little bit overlooked. Probably butchered the name, but we'll roll with it. Obviously a good winner at Ascot the last day. Had some decent form in behind Lake Victoria. I'm not sure if that horse is being overpriced. The only horse in here who really interests me, but it wouldn't be for this race, it's perhaps for further down the line and on a little bit of softer ground, is Bedtime Story. I thought ran a cracker over in France. I'd certainly keep her on side for later in the season. Perhaps she'll have a crack at the Arc de Triomphe, a step up in trip on softer ground. She had to come really wide the last day in France when being beat by a horse who's obviously a bit shorter than her in the market for the Arc, but she's one that I'd be looking to take forward. But for me, I'll be sitting this one out. I'm sure many will be thinking that Whirl is a good thing at 6-4, but this should be a good clash. Whirl against See the Fire. I don't really have an opinion on which one wins, and it'll just be just a race that I will probably visit the bar, get myself a drink and watch. The Golden Mile, I do have an opinion on, however. So Greek Order's currently favourite in at 8-1, joint favourite with Urban Lion. Now that's a little bit of a route into this race for me. If you look at Epps Guard for William Muir and Chris Grassick, he beat Urban Lion last season, and he was giving Urban Lion giving Urban Lion weight. Now there's a complete £5 swing here with Urban Lion having to give Epps Guard weight, and he's continued to run well, in all fairness to Epps Guard. He's run pretty consistently off higher marks, and now he's starting to drop down the handicap back to possibly a winnable mark, now off 95. He hasn't set the world alight, but he's bumped into a couple this season in the competitive handicaps he's running. For example, he's up against My Cloud, who was obviously an absolute good thing at Newbury, and then More Thunder he bumped into at Newmarket, who again was obviously absolutely backed off the boards and got up late in the dying strides. So this season, Back in April, he was the race where he beat Urban Lion. He's then finished 13th of 17th at Ascot, when Hickory was a nice winner for myself. Then he's been third behind My Cloud, 4th, 7th of 30, and 5th of 12 behind More Thunder. So he's ran credibly enough, but he has started to drop back down the handicap. Was as high as 97, now back down to a mark of 95. Would still need to probably put together a little bit of a career best. However, I do think that he has an each-way squeak. The other one that was on my radar is Apiarist, well below his last winning mark when winning on the all-weather. He has had a good few runs over the course of the winter and the autumn, so potentially one who's had perhaps one too many runs this season. But Apiarist at a massive price, 33s, 40s, something like that, would be another one on my radar. So those probably be the two that I would be looking at in the Golden Mile. The Qatar Stakes, the 5 furlong King George Qatar Stakes, and Asphora obviously didn't have a prep run prior to a run at Ascot at the Royal Meeting, finished 5th, and that was my kind of route into this race. Dead heated with a horse called Kurdos. Now, Kurdos went on to be well backed the last day and didn't run a particularly good race. However, that 5th, where he's dead heated with the current favourite here, he stumbled out the stalls, lost loads of ground, which is obviously far from ideal in these sprint events, and still managed to stay on to dead heat with his 4. And one of them is 2-1 and the other one's 20-1. Now, I know which one I'd rather side with as an each-way play. Another one that's interesting is Cardem. Yes, he's a 9-year-old. Has the speed gone? But Ryan Moore's jocked up, and they've paid 20 grand, Charlie Hills and Connections, to supplement this lad for this race. And so I thought he was quite interesting. JM Jungle's been consistent, of course, has the form lines with American Affair. And Enchanting is another, but I don't think will turn up here. Holly Doyle already jocked up even for another race. So JM Jungle, Cardem, Kurdos, they'd probably be on my radar. Asphora could come forward for that run. She would obviously improve for a prep run over this side of the water, and she could well just be too good for them. But I'll be willing to take her on, especially in these 5 furlong sprint heats where absolutely anything can happen. So Cardem, Kurdos, and potentially JM Jungle, but probably more likely the former two are the two that are on my radar for that. And finally, the only race on the Saturday, and I don't have a huge opinion, sadly. Maybe the boys do, but yeah, the Langtree Stakes, the Group 2 fillies and mares, Class 1. You've got Goody Two Shoes for Joseph O'Brien at the head of the market. I'd probably be waiting on more confirmed prices in a race that I'd have to look at in a little bit more depth. But nothing really stands out from my perspective with those. I suppose the only other thing to touch on is, of course, we have Galway this week. So I have a couple of selections after going through the plate. And I didn't really want to fall on... It was little bit of a battle, really, between head and heart when it comes to the likes of Jazzy Matty. Obviously, he's entered up there. Kean Collins said that this is the plan. Kean certainly knows what day of the week it is when it comes to getting one ready. A very good up-and-coming trainer. I started to look through the field. Nürburgring I thought was a bit short at around about 4-1 at the top of the market. Blood Destiny doesn't really tick the boxes, even from a trends perspective. Excuse me, far too high in the weights. So I did start to come round to thinking that Jazzy Matty, with the £7 hike from the Grand Annual win, could potentially go close. However, the step up in trip's a little bit of a concern. And then there's loads in there that just do not want to win. Adamantly Chosen, Mars Harper, the Goffo is consistently looking well handicapped without ever wanting to get his head in front. And I did end up having a good look at Chemical Energy, available at around about 33s, 40-1. He's around about a 5 or 6 time winner on good ground. He's got impeccable form with good in the going. 5th in this last year, and now £3 better off with the handicapper than when he finished 5th in the Galway Plate in 2024. I thought that potentially he could be overpriced, and of course Gordon will have a few primed for this. But it could just be the fact that Nürburgring is chucked in. However, I was willing to play something at a price. So Jazzy Matty, I'd probably be having a little bit of a saver on, with Chemical Energy being my main selection as an each-way poker, a massive price. That's pretty much a roundup from me, short and sweet. So hopefully there's a good few winners in there. I'll certainly be exposed this week without the boys being on the pod. So if it's full of losers, there's only one person we can blame, but hopefully that is not the case. Let us know your best bet down below for the week. I hope you all really enjoy the racing at both Galway and Goodwood. If, of course, you're heading to either track, then have a great time. If you're there at Goodwood on Thursday and you happen to see me at any point, by all means, come over and say hello. And as always, please just like and subscribe if you have not already to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.